Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and today I am sitting here with Laura Gisborne. How are you, Laura?
Good, Angela. Thanks for the invitation. It's nice to meet you.
My pleasure. So Laura Gisborne is a highly successful business growth strategist. She has owned 9 businesses over the last 30 years, ranging from small retail operations to a multi-million-dollar wine and real estate empire. Her company, Limitless Women, exemplifies that companies can be both profitable and purposeful, and has donated over $700,000 to charities globally. Yay! I'm so excited to talk to you. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, where do we get started? 9 businesses. That's amazing. Did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
No, I had no intention of being an entrepreneur.
Really?
None whatsoever, right? I always feel like I had my plan and then God had a different plan for my life, right? It was just kind of like one thing led to another. And so it sounds like you've had several businesses yourself. I was reading up on your bio and the show and things like that. So I don't know if it worked like this for you, Angela, but in our world, in my world at least, it seems like one business kind of gave birth to the next business, kind of led into the next thing, and so on and so forth. So part of what I'm working on now is a book about walking in faith and just really taking those steps as they show up in those opportunities. And
wow, I love that. I love that so much. So you say your first business led into more. So how did the first business come about?
The first business was already up, so I don't really I shouldn't get credit for that other than I was there, and I was there for a while. I married into a family business, into a restaurant called Medieval Inn that was in Dallas, Texas, and everybody in the family worked there, right? So my husband, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, everybody was there, and we were all there like 7 days a week. It was a very interesting time. And what I knew in that business, because we all wore a lot of different hats, but what I knew in that business is that it wasn't scalable when I wanted to be a mama. If I wanted to be a mother, I was going to need to make some decisions. And so my husband and I decided to sell our ownership there and move into opening up our next restaurant, what would allow us to have freedom to be with our children, right? So when we had our son, and he wasn't just sitting with us at work in the restaurant at 10 o'clock at night, we decided to move to more of a lunch style cafe and open a catering company. And then that business needed another location, and then one day it was like, oh, let's do something different, and moved on to the next one and the next one. I won't give you all that went from restaurants to real estate, that went to owning a winery and a clothing store and a tanning salon, and now a leadership company. So there you go.
Wow, that's amazing. So I love that you saw the vision of how to create scalable companies, right? Because that's the hardest part. Is so many people get into business and they have their one business, right? And they think, okay, I love what I do. I'm going to start a business because I want to work for myself. But then they get stuck, right? They get stuck at revenue, because when you're a solopreneur or you are just, running a small family owned business, you're limited to you, right? And so scaling is hard. And so if your business is a restaurant and you don't really have any vision to go beyond that restaurant, or you don't have any plans to go beyond that because it's just comfortable enough to support your family, then you hit a ceiling. And so sometimes it takes fresh perspective or a life change or a need to pivot is when you start figuring out scale.
Yeah, I think, I was very young at the time. I was in my early 20s, and someone, somebody would say, what do you do? Or meet somebody out in the world. I would say, I'm a waitress, or I'm a dishwasher, or I'm a cashier. You would really wear whatever hat there was to wear. And I see how that translates. If you can fast forward here more than 30 years, actually, because I'm 57 now. You see how you can that translate to what keeps women from scaling their businesses today. They're wearing all the different hats in their business, right? They're being the web designer, I'm being the marketing person, I'm being the copywriter, I'm being the speaker, I'm being the salesperson, I'm being the client fulfillment person, right? Just in a service-based business. You've got to learn to surround yourself with really great people. And, you know, I can say that we've been really blessed because over the years, what I've learned is that I love to create businesses. I love the creative process. And I don't love to do operations.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just, I'm not great at it, right? I'm not the person we want in the store, right? We want somebody who's actually really much better customer service than I am. So, you know, I've sold 6 of my companies. And I think as I've grown and as I've learned, what I've learned is to build with the end in mind. And I think that's a very different concept than most of us, you know, as new entrepreneurs or as early entrepreneurs. We had 1 or 2 businesses. We kind of get out there with hang our shingle with our excitement to solve a problem.
Right.
You know, it's a little different than building with the end in mind.
Yeah. And that's one thing that any business advisor will tell you from the beginning is, and this is the, this is the disconnect that I learned because I've owned a few businesses as well. And when I first started, it was, you know, you build a business out of necessity or out of problem solving, like you just said, like you want to solve a problem and you say, you know what, I'm going to take that on and you solve the problem, but you're not looking ahead to what does this mean? So my very first business, I had no idea how to operate a business. I had a psychology degree and I was like, I just want to do this one thing. Right. Like, and it kind of became an accidental business. But then when it was time to move on, I didn't know anything about M&A. I didn't know I could sell my business. I didn't know that, you know, because it was not a company that had physical assets. And I didn't know that you could sell other assets like, you know, your brand. I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a thing. Right. And so I just closed it up and moved it out of state and I was done. And I'm like, I left so much money on the table. Like you have no idea. But you learn as you go, right? And so now you're right. Starting a business with the end in mind is really what every business advisor will tell you. And it doesn't mean that you have to exit your business. Sometimes the end in mind is I have a family business and this generation is going to take it over at this point, but you're still working towards, you know, you're creating systems so that you can turn it over in an efficient way.
It's interesting because when I first started being asked to speak, I wasn't a speaker. I hadn't written any books. It wasn't anywhere in my purview. When you said, like, did you think you would always do this? No, I think when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then I took chemistry in high school and I was really bad at it. And so I thought, well, maybe I should go to law school instead because I can talk and I'm smart and I can read books. So, so it's like, again, the trajectory of where life takes you is always fascinating if you're open and willing to listen. The idea of a business being scalable and sellable, I think is interesting for women in a different perspective than I see with men, because we get a little bit emotionally attached to our businesses, right? I mean, we feel like there's just something in us being divinely created, you know, through our expression, and to be able to have good boundaries and good team development. I also think that women are amazing leaders. I think that we have a natural innate ability to tend and befriend, and when we have clear directives and great healthy boundaries, we can really lead. I had a great conversation. You know, everything that we do in our world is philanthropy first. And I had a great conversation with a woman just a few days ago who was an executive director of a nonprofit here locally. And I was just so impressed. She's been in the organization for 28 years, but she's just moved into this role of leadership. And it's just really inspiring to see all of her tenets of wisdom, right? All of her experience coming together in a place, you know, there's systems and processes and all the sexy stuff we can talk about, but people get inspired by who they work with. They get inspired by vision and mission. So, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and I think as women, we're really good at conveying vision and mission. And so we get people to buy into what we're doing because we also treat them differently. Like we treat them, you know, we're great at community building. I think that's one thing that women do better than anybody is we're great at community building. And so another reason why I think we don't necessarily look at exit strategy is because we consider our employees, our family, right?
Exactly.
Like they are part of our family. And how could I ever just give them away, you know, be like giving away your children, you know, you're like, I can't do that.
Seems a little strange. Yeah.
So I think that we become, you know, emotionally attached, like you were just saying, you become very emotionally attached to the business, to our employees, to the brand. That brand is an identifier for us.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a little challenging when we think about exit strategy, but exit strategy doesn't have to be, I'm abandoning my business, right? We have to get out of that mindset of, when you sold your 6 businesses, I want to know how that felt and when it felt right for you to sell those businesses.
I think that I can, there's different instances for each one, right? But I'd say initially, from the gut level, it had a lot to do with I was desiring to do something else, right? And I knew that, if I were to go back, Angela, and do my life over, I don't know that I would have sold 6 companies. I might have had a different plan, because what I see is the value of this company as an example that's grown into Limitless Women. This isn't how we started our brand. What I've seen is like the depth of relationships. And there's a whole lot of stuff that I knew in my 40s that I definitely did not know in my 20s or 30s, right? Yeah. So I think I've become a better leader, and I've become a better partner for my clients. And so I think that that's an interesting thing. Mostly it was a pull because I wanted to go do something else. And I had probably a little bit of my own poverty consciousness where I thought I could do this or that. I didn't understand my capacity. And I usually would hold somewhere between 3 and 4 businesses. Right now I have 2 businesses. So I would have multiple businesses and multiple streams of income just because I got a lot of energy and a lot of creativity. And I build great teams. So my teams tend to take on the stuff that I'm not great at. I think that that's one of those things. But I just think it's probably different for different people. It's not that I didn't love the business anymore. It's that I also felt like maybe I had taken it as far as I could. Right. There was the personal desire to do something else, but it was also like, we're using the analogy of being a mama today, raising a kid and sending them off to college. It's tough. Right. Yeah. So tough. I was talking to somebody else about that this week, a man who was talking about his wife losing her mind. And they said, when I first went to college, my husband couldn't find me for 2 weeks. Like, he would just find me in the bathroom, sitting on the floor crying. I was just so devastated to think about my baby living home, and I have very independent adult children. They're just awesome people, but, I missed him. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's tough. And again, as women, we do tend to grab on and we nurture relationships. And so when you're nurturing a relationship, whether it's with a child or a business or employees or whatever that is, it feels like you're taking something away from you when that moves on. So I understand that. So also might be another reason why we tend to overwork. Right. We tend to have higher burnout rates than men do, because it's all very personal to us. It's very personal. And so what do you have for advice for overworking?
Self-care, learning self-care, right? I think it's this place of, I said to you this morning, I normally take my interviews in my office, and today I came to sit down on the couch and move my stuff around to really just take care of myself. Just knowing that, my husband had a hard night last night, and so we were up quite a bit. And he said, let me just sit down. And so standing up and take care of myself so I can really give you my best. I have lots of videos and trainings on self-care, but I can tell you that I think it's really that place where there's no valor in not taking care of our bodies. Our bodies carry a very heavy load to carry our spirit, our essence, our mission. And I say that just because, I feel like you are a similar person, and you're in a business that really has a vision that actually wants to bring your message to the world. You have a mission-focused business. It takes a lot. It takes a lot physically to do that. So self-care is important, and boundaries, taking time off. And really, it takes a lot of faith to turn it off and recognize that it's going to be there, to really say, okay, I'm not going to work on Sunday. I'm going to take that day of rest to really rejuvenate, or I'm going to put my vacations on my calendar first. I'm going to plan my family time first before I build my business. And, I just see way too many women build their businesses as their main goal, right? Like, that's their goal. It's like their life gets put second to their business. I think that your business should be built around your life. Your life should be what you choose first, and then choose when you want to take your time and your creativity to be expressed in business. And there's always enough.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Self-care is one of those things that, like, for me, I pre-schedule it, like if I want to do like a monthly massage, I pre-schedule that so that it's on the calendar. Because if it's not on the calendar, if it's one of those like, oh, I should do this, I should, I really need to do this, it's not going to happen. Like it will get put back on, if it's a priority to me, it must be on the calendar.
I live with
So,
that. I just
and that
literally live. I live through my calendar. And it's one of the things
yeah.
where I feel like if more women would get out of to-do list
Mm-hmm.
and really allow themselves to receive support, because that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And to, if there's not room in my calendar, then I have to say not now.
Yeah.
I don't, I'm like any woman, I like to say yes. I'd rather not say no, but some things are a hard no, but many things are not now.
Yeah. I
It's
like
just
that.
require space, and
Yeah.
often I can say, like, you and I finding time is so graceful and just so excited that we got together so quickly.
Yeah.
My next availability really is December right now. So I know
Right.
that. I know what my schedule is going to be like. So if it was, we met again in December, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But I
Yeah.
think it's that place of just honoring your commitments and being okay with that. It takes
Yeah.
courage, it takes experience, it takes confidence, it takes a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things to really be able to have healthy boundaries.
Yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the not now
Yeah.
concept because, you're not saying no. It's not a hard no. It's like, look, I'm at capacity and
Yeah.
I'm just asking for grace for my schedule, and so
Yeah.
that's really good. I like that a lot. So I want to pivot into the philanthropy.
Mhm.
So all of your businesses, you've talked about being mission driven and really kind of wanting to give back. So how did that start, and how do you choose who you give back to, and what does that mean as part of your business? It's a lot of questions all at
How many
once.
questions can I answer? Okay,
Uh,
let's go. Go. Okay, so what I heard was, and hopefully if I missed any, just grab me and pull
yeah,
me
yeah.
back in. But what I heard was, how did it start?
Mm-hmm,
And then I heard, how do you choose?
yeah.
And then there was something else, but I probably missed that one. What?
How does that connect to your business?
Perfect. Okay, great. So I'll see if I can encompass those and just
Mm-hmm.
put it together. So I grew up in pretty rough standards for Americans. And I
Okay.
say that because my work is taking me all over the world now. I've been blessed to work in Africa and South America and Asia. Um, and what I recognize as a person who's been blessed to have the opportunity to travel and be out in the world in service is that
Yeah.
what we have in the United States in the way of, I'll give you an example, like our hot water heater has been out all week, but I live in Texas, it's 107 degrees, so really who cares? Because we're so
Right.
happy to take a cold shower anyway right now, or
Yeah.
go jump in the pool. I mean, we're really blessed. But I can tell you, it's interesting is like what we have in the way of access to free education, what we have in the access to a roof over our head, to running water, to access to resources. Even someone who grows up in the United States with a tremendous amount of struggle financially, and I'm not talking about people that are food insufficient or don't have a home, but most of us that grow up working class or what would be considered, lower to middle class, we really have an abundant life.
Right.
What was not easy in my childhood is that I was sexually molested for 7 years. I grew up in a family with a tremendous amount of violence, many different fathers. And I grew up feeling like I wasn't wanted. And that,
Wow.
my mother was very young when she had me. And she kept saying, if I just hadn't had you, my whole life could have been so much better.
Wow.
So, right? So I decided as a baby that made me wrong. And if I could just be good enough. And this is an interesting thing, Angela, thinking about the Pretty Powerful podcast. Think about women who are coming together and really supporting each other in our power. Many women that I meet, and a lot of men actually that are super successful as well, have this drive that comes from not enough.
Yeah.
This drive of like, man, if I could just do more or be more. That just happens because somebody said something to us as a baby and we just didn't know any better, right? And we just thought, boy, if I could just, think about it. What am I trying to prove with 9 different companies? Why not just have a great company?
Right.
I always say I don't attract the type A's of the world. We are a community of triple A's. All the people that say things can't be done, it's like a magnet to us. We're like, get in there. That's us, right? So when I went to law school, I was in law school. I was working basically as a paralegal legal secretary during the day, going to law school at night. And something came across my purview there that was CASA, which is Court-Appointed Special Advocates for Foster Children. And they just caught my eye. And again, I was very young, it was my early 20s. I just thought, man, wouldn't it be nice if I could tap into that organization and maybe start to give back? I'd already been on a lot of my own healing and recovery at that point. I've been through a lot of years of therapy at that point. And I thought, let me see how I can tap in and try to help. So I became a CASA volunteer for 5 years. And then CASA, which works basically in an intervention situation where you go in and work with foster families and with parents who are trying to reconcile with their families. led me to one understanding of the for-benefit nonprofit world for children. I also became a mama during that time. And while I was in my childbirth classes, I asked the nurse, I said, this is great. All these women around me are like, how do I deal with the pain? What am I going to do? And I'm like, we're in the hospital. Like, I'm pretty sure you guys have this part figured out. This thing is coming out of me. It's my first baby. I didn't know there's a big thing going on. This is going to happen. I said, how do I be a parent?
Yeah.
I knew I didn't want to parent the way I'd been parented. I knew I didn't want to beat my child. He hadn't even come out yet. And I knew there had to be a different way, but this is all before the internet, right? We didn't have access. I was a voracious reader, but I didn't really know. And so she said, we don't do those types of classes here at the hospital. Let me help you find someplace. And so she did. She helped me find an organization called Family Outreach. And the parents who were in there were court mandated or had been, kind of like a step away from having a termination with their families. And I asked, can I come and make a donation? And I made a donation of $200 at a time. They let me come into the class and take the class. And then I started teaching the classes. Then I started coordinating the parent education program, yada, yada, yada. So fast forward 30 years building private sector businesses. I always was working in the nonprofit sector as well. That's what I did for fun on nights and weekends, was really had this opportunity to grow and give and volunteer. And then that led, as I started to grow in my leadership capacity and my understanding of organizations, I started being asked to be on boards of, boards of directors and advisory boards and things like that for nonprofits. So it started to grow. When I started being asked to speak and lead, to answer your question, 2009, 2010, I started receiving these invitations. I really, at first I said, no, I'm not a speaker. No, I got nothing for you. Right. Can I write you a check? Can I help? And how can I help? And what I did, Angela, is I went to prayer with it, and I wasn't as deeply connected to my faith then as I am now, but I went to prayer, went to meditation, and I asked to be shown, like, what is happening here? Why do I keep receiving these invitations? And what's the deeper calling behind this? And what I kept hearing was the invitations were around women. The invitations were global. It wasn't, can you come down to Phoenix? I lived in Arizona at the time. It was, can you come to China? Can you come to India? Wow. And it was around philanthropy. And I didn't identify as a philanthropist. I didn't see myself that way. I thought, well, who am I to do this? And so I thought, how do I take my experience in the private sector? People are asking me, how do you do what you do? And how do I take what I know that's in my heart, which is that when we give, we grow. We are healed by helping others heal, right? That I knew that those two things could come together. And that's what's grown into the Limitless Women organization. And we set metrics. We said, okay, if we can have business training fundraisers and raise, our first goal was to raise $10,000. We raised $35,000, right? And then we thought, if we could raise over 5 years, we have the metrics, we're running companies, doing our thing, living life, raising babies, we could give away $250,000 over 5 years. That would mean we're on the right track. Well, we hit the 5-year mark. We were over 500,000 at that point, probably closer to 6. And I was like, oh, but this is interesting. So, it's a very interesting model to me, obviously, because I think it works. I've watched it work. I've watched women who say, someday when I get there, I'm going to give, start bringing in giving as a part of their business model, and just start to see themselves in a new capacity. When we say, I don't have enough to give, we're limiting ourselves, right? Yeah. When we give a little bit, because I'm going to tell you something, we've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars at $10 a pop, $20 a pop, $50 a pop. And we didn't have a big check from any organization like Gates Foundation. We've done a little bit at a time. Thousands of women have donated. And it's just that place of, like, together, we get to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And we start to see ourselves in expanded capacity, right? We thought, if I can do this with a little less, and I can actually help someone else who doesn't have access to basic necessities like food, water, sanitation, sanitary pads, think about that. That's something that is a little bit of a mind blower if you grow up in the United States or Canada, the developed world. Right. Women in the world who don't have access to sanitary pads, they drop out of school. They have no choice. Wow. 12 years old, 13 years old, they go and get married because that's what they can do.
Wow. Well, that's really powerful. I love that. Love that story. So I can totally, that resonates with me with, foster care, because foster care is something that I've always been drawn to, just because there's so many amazing children in the system that really need our help. And, as a child, you can't help yourself. And, you're put into a situation where you've been removed from the only family you know. And even if it's an abusive family, even if it's horrible, even if it's drug infested household, it's still all you know. And now you're forced to live with other people that you don't know and may not always be good to you. Right. And so there's a lot of that too. When I was in college, I actually thought I would go into forensic psychology and the FBI, and that was my path. And so I studied child psychology, and I did my internship with the Department of Juvenile Justice. And just looking in these children's eyes, this beautiful, innocent child who has just been put through hell. And, now they're having to figure it out as a child, things that they should never have to figure out, like you, who, have been in abusive situations. And, all I can do is pray that they learn to use that fuel, that hurt for fuel for good. Right. Because if you can, and I see so many powerful entrepreneurs, and you were just talking about how, it's that type A where we're driven to get, we get pulled together like magnets, and a lot of it is through pain, right? That pain creates this fire in us that, is unstoppable. Like we've already been through hell. You can't do anything to me is how we feel. Right.
Yeah.
You can't hurt me.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah.
And so I think our risk tolerance is higher. I think our ability to fight through the nasty, dirty parts of entrepreneurship when it hurts and it's painful and you want to quit, you already know, like, I'm not going to quit. I've been through worse, right? And so I think that gives you that tenacity, that gives you that drive, that passion, that fire that is so hard for somebody who's never been through, any hard times, somebody who's lived a very privileged life. They don't necessarily have that tenacity, that grit that it's going to take sometimes to get through the hard stuff. And, crawling through mud is sometimes what it takes as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we host an event every year called Flow, and that's coming up this fall. And it's interesting for me because, again, if I were to go back and rewind, and I'm thinking, you invite me to come, people invite me to come and speak on their platforms about this experience. It doesn't have to be so hard.
No,
there's not the valor. You've done some hard work already. And I do think Scott's my husband. He said to me one time, I was talking about a girlfriend who we would get together, we'd chat, she'd tell me about all our problems. And I'd be like, oh, maybe you could do this. This is all before I was doing this leadership work. This is years ago. And then we talked 6 months later, and it was exactly the same situation. Right. And I said, I just don't know why I'm having the same conversation with Sarah over and over again. And he said, you are a queen bee. He said, you don't really see yourself that way. He said, but if you think about a beehive, it's just a beautiful visual. If you think about a beehive, you've got one queen and you've got oodles of workers. And if you look at entrepreneurship, if you look at successful businesses that are run by women, and even businesses that don't make it to the $1 million mark, because, depending on whose stats you're playing with, you're somewhere between 2 and 4% ever hit 7 figures. Which, you could have a $100,000 business, a $200,000 business, and be really successful and take care of yourself, take care of your family. Entrepreneurs on the whole tend to think differently. I'm with you. I believe that we not only are risk tolerant, we actually enjoy the risk. We enjoy that. It's a little bit exciting for us. And the world needs worker bees.
Yeah.
They may not be listening to this podcast, but the world needs worker bees. And if you're a leader who's here to build an organization, you're going to need people to do the things that are not in your zone of genius. And some are really meant to be followers. I think, in our own experience, the best team members that I've had that have stayed with me for 5 years or 7 years or 10 years are when we cultivate leaders, when we lead other leaders and give them autonomy and encourage them. Action is one of our company's core values. There's just no valor in struggling. You don't have to. You don't have to. There's actually real problems in the world. I was having an interview this week with another podcast that was asking me about, the one was asking me about makeup. And I said, I don't know that you're rude. I appreciate this is like a big podcast. I didn't really appreciate that you invited me to come here. I said, but this is not a real problem. Whether or not you wear makeup on camera is not a real problem. There are people in the world, over, close to 3 billion people in the world that really struggle with sufficiency and struggle with food, access to food and water. I think that's a more, a more interesting topic, in my opinion. How do we actually build profitable businesses so that we can help other people have access to resources who may not ever have that? It's literally why I do what I do today, Angela. I would not be doing this work if someone had not seen me. When I went to the law office with bruises on my face and I weighed 98 pounds because I was severely anorexic. I was living with a man who was beating me on a regular basis. That was normal to me. I grew up in an environment of being beaten. It was absolutely normal to go into a relationship of being beaten, right? And to have so little self-esteem that I would forget to eat. Just people see me today who could know that, right? There were women who saw me when I couldn't see myself, who said, come here, honey, let me help you. Here's a book. Here's some counseling opportunities. Let's see about how you could create a different normal. That's what entrepreneurs have an opportunity to do. Take our superpowers, take our creative genius, take care of our sufficiency, take care of ourselves. Don't get hung up in the valor that somehow you're going to be a better person because you struggle. No, you've done that. Let it go. Instead, take this opportunity to really get beyond survival and the other and self-actualization. I'm saying this to you in your experience, right? And go to the place beyond self-actualization. You take Maslow's hierarchy of needs and put it in a pyramid. What happens above the pyramid? This is the space we live in. We get to give, right? We become expanded because we have come through and we've become self-actualized. And now what? Right. We get to be a part of a much bigger purpose.
So do you feel though that, through the struggle, and you're right. I mean, there's no valor in struggle, but it creates character in you, such as empathy, such as, the need to want to help, that need to not be able to sit back and watch something else happen that shouldn't be happening, right? Like you can't sit back and be you're no longer a passenger in life, you're a driver. Right. So that is what that, I understand your point about there being no valor in struggle, but there becomes a pivoting point where you say no more, and I'm going to change things, and you become a change maker. Right. And so that's where I think a lot of entrepreneurs get that ability to push through the hard stuff, like pandemic. My whole company shut down for 5 months during the pandemic, the entire thing. I mean, we were down to zero revenue. We took a $350,000 loss in 48 hours. And I mean, that hurts, trust me, a lot of me wanted to just tuck my tail and run and say, I'm done. I just want to be done. I just want to be happy with what I've achieved so far and pivot to the next thing. But it just couldn't happen. Right. Like I felt like I've brought myself through so much pain. I have to see it through to the end. Right. And so it was either going to go down in flames or I was going to, just win at the end. And so yeah, I mean, that grit and that tenacity and just wanting to see yourself go beyond and reach your, whatever that limit might be. And hopefully it's like, I love the name of your company, Limitless Women. That's amazing. So, I mean, we're capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for.
Well, I think that, I just thank you for sharing your journey. Thank you for using your voice as a vehicle to inspire others. And I think that that's a little bit of what I would consider a growing pleasure instead of a growing pain, Angela.
Yeah.
The opportunity that, you had resources available to you. And I think that that's part of what I was saying to you. My faith has really deepened. Probably since my husband, I was sitting in a hospital with my husband in 2017, and his surgeon said to me, he's dying. I can't save him. And I am, being an entrepreneur, it wasn't really even a push. It was like a spark. I just said, I really appreciate that you've done what you could do, but he's not dead yet.
Yeah. And
I'm in a hospital. And what else you got? And he's like, well, he's not a candidate for this. He's not a candidate for that. I'm like, okay, well, who can help us? That's something I'll tell you as an entrepreneur. I'm going to call it a $10 million distinction. Sometimes maybe it's more than that. Instead of how do I do this?
Right.
Who can help me? And I found, Angela, when I reflect back on my life, even when I was sitting on the side of the road, being beaten up and crying And this is before cell phones, right? I found my way to a payphone, and I found a place to go, even though I didn't have family to go to. There was some place for me to go, right? And there's so many stories in my own life, and I'm sure in yours as well, where you went to the edge. And you had a $350,000 loss in 48 hours, if I heard that correctly.
Yeah.
And you had $350,000 to lose. So congratulations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're not hungry, you're not homeless, and you're capable and resourceful. And I think that's the part of kind of this deeper body of work of walking in faith, is that when we allow ourselves to be shown, and we've been imbued with this incredible gift of creativity and tenacity and drive, how do we partner with that to have the journey be a little easier? How do we partner with that to be a little easier? And because I'm a faith-based person, I spend my mornings just in gratitude for all that is. Yeah. And I ask to be shown, what would God have me do next? Yeah. And more importantly, I've learned over the last few years, how may I be obedient? Was a hard prayer for me to learn, because I thought I had it all figured out, right? And every time I've had it figured out, something shows up that lets me know that I'm not done yet, right? There's more for me to learn.
More growing.
Yeah. So gentle learning, flowing instead of struggling, and being with what is. Often, I don't know if you had this experience, but often when I'm trying to push to something, I'll use law school as an example. I was applying, really hard to get in. I finally got in. It's because I wasn't actually even meant to be practicing law. I would have a whole nother purpose in my life, if you will. But sometimes we're pushing against the wall so hard we can't see it. If we just look to the right or the left, there's something there for us that we're not even seeing.
Oh God, you're such a beautiful soul. I just love everything that you're saying. You have so much great inspiration. How's your husband doing now?
It's interesting. He's thank you for asking. It's really generous. He's good. He's having some other stuff going on right now, but we were told this is it. He might die tonight. He might die this weekend. And that was 6 years ago. Wow. So every day is a blessing. And he told me yesterday that I was being really not nice. And he used a different word. He's like, I know you're in launch. I know you're coming back. I had spinal fusion surgery last year. So I had, an opportunity to go quiet, go into my cocoon, come out again. And it's, he took good care of me. And I think it's that place of like, just remember to be good to yourself, to be good to the people around you, to recognize the preciousness of the time that we have. I talk about this in my first book, Stop the Spinning, which we give away for free, as the wake-up calls: death, divorce, disease. You talked about COVID. To me, I feel like COVID was something where God was speaking to us as a species.
Yes.
And it probably had, this is just my 2 cents, we'll see how it goes, but it probably had something to do with where we're moving into with AI. There was something in the pause that we had a chance to really decide what matters. Yeah. And we'll see how it all plays out. We'll see how it plays out. But yeah.
Gosh.
Let's be good to ourselves and each other in the meantime. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Be good to yourselves and be good to those around you, because you just don't know. Every day is a blessing. So who inspires you?
Thanks for asking. I am a huge fan of Joel Osteen. I listen to him all the time. So he helps me with remembering, right? Remembering. There's so much in this around remembering. I am deeply inspired by women who choose to work in the nonprofit arena as their calling. Again, do the things that other women think. I always think like what we do from the philanthropic end of offering our time, our talents, our tithes, our dollars is very small compared to the people who are in the trenches. You think about foster parents. They're actually raising children who come out of violent and dangerous situations in a safe way. Some are not, some are great, but I'm just saying, honestly, the people that actually do that work are the people that inspire me. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So what is the biggest lesson you've learned as a successful entrepreneur?
Just one.
Just one.
My goodness, I'm literally in the midst of writing 2 more books, right?
Oh my gosh,
I went from I'm not an author. Why do you keep asking about my book? And I've written 2, and then I've got 2 more that are coming right now. What's been the biggest lesson? I think it comes back to this, Angela. when we were kids growing up, and I think about you in forensic psychology, and
Yeah.
you and I sharing kind of a passion for criminal justice. My minor is in criminal justice, and thinking about the justice in the world, right, and being liberators for others. Every human being is unique, and we knew this, like Sherlock Holmes. We knew there was fingerprints, right? We knew that kind of stuff. We didn't know then, as kids growing up, and I don't know, because like I said, I'm almost 60 now, but you're much younger than I am. But as a kid, we didn't know about things like retinas being unique, right? We didn't know about DNA. You know, it's an interesting thing. My son, he's in medical school right now, but he's a geneticist. And I remember when he was in high school saying to him, you're going to have a different chemistry than I have because of the healing I experienced before you were born. And he's like, okay, Mom, sounds good. No.
Yeah.
And yet when he went to college and he was studying genetics, they have this field called epigenetics. And it's interesting how our genes can heal, how our DNA, how our internal can heal, as well as our external. The body is really made to heal. I believe our spirit can heal as well. I believe that every person, even people who are born into me, and so you're talking about people who have privilege, Angela, everyone has a journey and everyone feels their struggle authentically. So when we recognize that the journey is something that is unfolding, and, you know, we get, time is short. What do you want to do at the time? You know, I hang out in the arena of women specifically who are here to heal cycles. And so it's like living in heaven on earth for me, right? To live in conversations like this, where you know, depending on whether I'm in the ether or the deep end of the ocean, there's like no place in between, right? We're just not, surface conversations aren't happening. So I would say the most important thing I've learned is that we're all very unique, and that each one of us plays a part in a tapestry that we can't often see. I feel like that's the partnership with the divine, is to allow ourselves to be led, to not struggle when things are coming through for us, but to recognize that we may not understand, kind of in that not now idea, we may not understand why something's happening right now. But if we continue to move in faith, if we continue to be kind, if we continue to be gentle, the process unfolds for us. And, you know, in my experience, it just keeps getting better and better.
Wow, you are so inspiring. I am just loving this conversation.
Thank you, Tom.
I want to be respectful of your time, but I have one more question, and I just know that you're going to crush this question too, because you have just inspired me so much, and I've just learned so much, and I have so much respect for what you're doing.
Well, let's continue the conversation. I mean, I got to bounce off and teach a class today, but let's you and I stay friends. And where do you live? I didn't even ask you.
Atlanta.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I'm in Texas. We're not that far.
And I'll be in Dallas in a couple of weeks, actually.
Oh, good. Let's for sure. You've got my number. Text me and let's figure that out. I would love to see you and spend some time together.
Absolutely. So one thing I want to know from you is, what do you wish more people knew?
What do I wish more people knew? That's such a good question. I wish that more people knew that in order to not feel lonely, in order to not feel the struggle, that in order to not feel the not enough, there's the drive when you're on fire and you're passionate and you're excited about something. It's a very different drive than I've got to prove something. And that I said, that's a thing I can say to you now at 57. I definitely didn't know at 27, right? Yeah. So it's that grace of the peacefulness. We are multifaceted beings. So we're not simply tactics and strategies. I can teach people systems all day long, every day, but if they don't have a leadership component, they're going to be missing out, right? If their mindset isn't evolving as their systems are evolving, their organization doesn't grow, right? So systems are great. We know in our world that we only partner with women who are spiritually connected. And I believe that all traditions and all walks of faith are our human curiosity about the mystical. It's what is the divine. I know that, I know my path as a Christian, and I also know that some of the most beautiful souls, some of the most generous, impressive humans I've ever met have a different tradition. Whether that may be that they're in the Amazon rainforest and they have their connection to the divine as nature, or they're in Asia and they're really following a Buddhist path. I think that there are many paths to our spiritual selves. Yeah. And I think that every woman who feels a little lonely or a little scared at times or a little anxious, could do some good for herself, to take some time to breathe into finding a spiritual opening that feels safe for her. You know, that's really where a lot of the peace that I experience today in my mature years comes from. And I know that if I'd allowed myself to receive that support and been a little more aligned with my spiritual self as a younger woman, my journey would have been even more graceful than it has been.
Yeah, I that resonates, because I feel the same way. There's so many times when I was younger that I felt like I had the world on my shoulders, right? Like, you're carrying it. And then when I finally started connecting spiritually, I started realizing I'm not carrying this, right? Like, this is not my burden to bear. There's something bigger than me. There's a bigger purpose than me. There's a bigger, you know, when you start believing in something outside of you that is bigger, and you know that the things that you're going through are just growth. It's just lessons. It's just growth, you know? And so all you have to do is just keep going, you know, that the path will unfold before you. So
yeah, it's a big thing to walk in faith.
It's really hard sometimes.
Yeah, it really is.
But it takes a lot, and that's why it's called faith, right? Like, you have to lay it down and just say, you know, I believe that somebody has my greater good in mind, and I don't know what that is, but I'm just going to believe that it's there.
I think, again, if we're alive and breathing, God's not done with us yet. You know, I mean, this is really the place. I have story after story after story, like you have story after story after story, where you're like, okay, other people are like, how'd you get through that and come through? You know, you did, and you're here. So how do we just enjoy this day?
Yes. Well, I will be praying for your husband and wishing you all the best in everything that you're doing, because you are just living such an abundant life in what you're giving to everyone else. So congratulations on your success. Congratulations on the influence and the impact that you're having in the world. And I'm so appreciative and respectful of that. So thank you.
Can't wait to have you in person when I get to see you.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. So how can people find you?
Oh, good question. So I'm pretty easy to find online, and you look up limitlesswomen.com. It'll take you to our site. We have oodles of free gifts, right? We have the Limitless Women podcast. We have, we give out free gifts on Fridays. So someone can go to freegiftfriday.com and opt in there and get free gifts from us. And again, if you don't like them, opt out. It's easy peasy. But my book, if you opt in there, you'll get a copy of Stop the Spinning, Move from Surviving to Thriving. And that lays out some of kind of the groundwork, some of the practices around time and revenue and walking in faith, and some of the things we've talked about today that I've learned on my journey that I hopefully will be helpful for others.
Wow, amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time and for the gifts that you have already given us. So I know that this has been really, really impactful for me. So, and I know for our listeners too. So thank you so much for your time. Again, Laura Gisborne can be found on prettypowerfulpodcast.com and also through her own website. And please do check her out and follow her, get her book. So again, Laura, thank you so much. You've been an amazing inspiration, and I wish you Godspeed in everything that you're doing.
Thanks, sweetie.
All right, everybody, please check us out for another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for joining our guests on the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we hope you've gained new insight and learned from exceptional women. Remember to subscribe or check out this and all episodes on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Visit us next time, and until then, step into your own power.